Hey everyone, you are listening to the Self-Awareness Journey podcast. This little banter is about a car ride long and features your hosts, JJ Parker and Melissa Albers. JJ owns a tech company and Melissa has been a coach working with influencers for the last 18 years.
Well, Melissa, I have been back into playing tennis pretty regularly.
Good,
now that
that's good.
Things have kind of like moved into a routine. And I love tennis. I've been playing tennis for years.
I know it.
And I started back in my USTA league, which is like, it's competitive tennis, but it was like amateur competitive tennis. I mean, like, you want to win, but it's not the end of the world. And then you usually go drink beers after.
That sounds like my kind of tennis.
Yeah, it's good. So I was in a match this weekend, and my partner and I, it was a great match. I mean, the ball was back and forth. The teams were evenly matched. We were having a great time, right? And we were playing a set point, which means that if we won that point, we won the set. And in that case, if we had won that set, we had won the match. So it was a match point, now that I think about it. It is a big deal point, right?
It's a really big deal point.
Right? And for those of you that don't know tennis is kind of a fun game in the scoring because you get these opportunities to like win the entire thing. But then if you miss that point, like then you have to get 2 more points to win, right? Like it just like if you miss one of those key points, the whole thing sort of like
falls apart. Got it.
So here I am. We're in the match point, playing for that set. The ball's going back and forth. And I knew this team from playing that day. I knew that if I dropped that ball short in the court, they were going to pop it up because they'd been doing it all night. So I sliced a nice little backhand short. The opponent ran up. They popped that ball up. And it's like when that ball comes up and it just gets lobbed to you like softball lobbed, your eyes become like cartoon eyes. You're like, oh my God, there it is, right? And the thing's just floating in slow motion, and you like go back and get set to just rip that ball through like the ground, right? Like I was just going to hit the crap out of that ball, and I was going to win, and it was going to win the match, and it was going to be so awesome, right? And the entire time I'm thinking that ball is just so floating there. And I go back and I smack that ball and it goes straight down into the net. And we lose that point.
What did your cartoon eyes do then?
I just like looked at the ground and hung my head in shame and walked back. But that happens all the time in tennis. Like in tennis, it's the funniest thing because you get an opportunity and you have this just like grandiose expectation about what's going to happen. And you play through the point and the celebration and everything in like a split second.
It's over.
And then you screw it up like every time, or it just doesn't happen the way you think it's going to happen. Right?
Do you know, that's actually just like being a salesperson. It's exactly like being a salesperson. The entire month, you're just like on the ragged edge, right? Until the 30th or the very last day of the month. And you don't know what's gonna happen. Like you don't know what's gonna happen. And then when you win, you celebrate, but then it's the first of the month and you're back to
the
zero.
Very next day, right?
The very next day you're back to zero.
Well, I think it's really interesting to talk about outcomes and your expected outcomes, right?
Yeah.
Because like my experience in just simply playing the game of tennis is a lot of times when I go back for those kinds of shots and I have these expectations, they almost never come true. Right? And sometimes when I go and hit a ball and I have no expectation, it works out well, a lot better most of the time, which is weird.
Yeah. I think that what we're talking about here is outcomes and expectations and the combination thereof. And I think like for me, because I too am a really competitive person, not in tennis, not a good tennis player.
In sales.
In sales, like really bad. I may be getting a little more relaxed in my advanced age.
Yeah.
But early on, that I would really set such extreme expectations for certain outcomes, and when they didn't happen, it would be devastating.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would be so emotionally wrought over not getting what I had in my mind pictured was an absolutely sure thing.
Yeah.
And I always say now, like expectations are resentments waiting to happen. One of my coaches used to say that to me, Susan, and I just, at first I would be like, oh, I don't like when she says that. However, it's so true. Like a lot of times we set ourselves up, where we just get like super interested in something, we just play it in our minds over and over again. We're not really checking in with ourselves. We're just in our own heads, like this is going to happen. And we get all this energy and momentum going, and then boom, nothing. It doesn't work. And we're just kind of devastated.
Yeah.
So yeah. I think that like as you're talking about outcomes, it's like there's like certain outcomes that we do try to plan all the time. And I think we don't even really realize that we're doing that a lot of the times.
Yeah. The other thing I think is interesting about outcomes is a lot of times we set them, right? Like I think this is going to happen.
Yeah.
But the amount of control you have over those things is really low, right?
Yeah.
Like I see that in a work context a lot. Like, hey, we've got this whole plan. We expect this to happen. But then the amount of control we actually have over customers and the market and all these different moving parts is surprisingly low. So
yeah,
when we don't maybe hit our mark, we blame ourselves when in reality, there's so many other things happening there that's kind of a misattribution.
Oh, that's so true. I do a lot of strategic planning with my clients, and I'm just like kind of thinking about what you're talking about right now, because we're just coming off of strategic planning season where everybody is trying to get their whole game plan set for their company for the next year, and sometimes even further out than that. And you're right. Like now we're talking about expectations of whole groups of people and expectations and outcomes based on what? Feelings?
Yeah.
Ideas? Theory. So why is it that we have such a strong need to set really strong outcomes, and how disappointing it is when we don't hit them? Isn't that an interesting thing?
It is interesting. It makes me think about the idea of an outcome maybe versus a dream or a fantasy or like a really grand plan, right?
Yeah.
Because, in my tennis example, I expected to hit the ball super awesome and win the point, right?
Yeah.
But, and that's pretty like simple, a simple expectation.
Yeah.
I've only hit 40,000 of the same ball. This one just happened to go in the net. But then we have other expectations, like I expect to be retired by the time I'm 50, or I expect I expect my children to behave in a certain way. That doesn't happen.
I expect to go into Target and buy the 3 things that I went in there to buy, and that's it.
So expectations are kind of like a continuum. There's some like real, just like on the ground kind of expectations, right?
Yeah.
And then there's really big expectations, which almost move into something more like a fantasy, right? Like, like you maybe are just wishing or hoping something's going to happen.
Yeah. I think it's interesting to bring in the whole notion of the self-awareness journey right in this point, though, as we're talking about like setting expectations in our brain. There has to be a connection, right, between how you feel about something as you're setting that target and what that outcome should be. Like there's got to be a feeling check in there. Like sometimes we create these wild things in our head, like you're saying the word fantasy, and that's true. And then we actually know that we're not going to be able to hit them. Like we know that, and yet we force feed ourselves this idea that, well, if we just try harder, we can.
Yeah.
It's like we're in our heads a lot, It's like we're in our heads a lot.
Well, it is the idea. Okay, so like this idea that we have these expectations. If we don't meet them, we get upset. We judge ourselves about them. But then setting those expectations, you have to be realistic about it, right?
Right.
And where that line is for different people is interesting, because like in one way, like what you're saying is like, hey, if I expect nothing to happen, nothing good, I just
nothing good, nothing
completely
bad.
passive about everything.
Yep.
Well, the fear is that then I'll never achieve anything.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
That would be, I think, our cultural fears. Like, hey, if you're not setting goals and if you're not really reaching for the stars and, you're not going big, then you're never going to achieve anything. And I don't know that that's true. Actually, I know that that's not true.
Right. It's all the relationship with our own internal, it's our own makeup though, isn't it? It's like, it's our own expectations of ourselves as we're pushing these outcomes out. And how many times are we setting these outcomes and expectations because we care about what other people see?
Yeah. Oh, that's true. That's a really good point. It's more like an external thing than an internal thing.
Right. And I think what happens then a lot of the times is we start to try to really control, like we're trying to control everything in that way again. And we just know there's really no such thing as controlling a lot of those outcomes. There really isn't. We really feel like there is. If we just push harder, if we just think about it more, if we just do more planning, if we just force people into thinking the way that we think, or we sell people on the way we want this to look, then we can really manually get there.
Yep. Yeah. You said another thing that's really interesting about external, right? It made me think of last weekend we watched The Breakfast Club.
Oh my gosh,
Right.
I love
Remember that movie?
Of course I do. Do I remember it? Silly.
And the whole thing, one of the things about the Breakfast Club movie is that, like, they're all stereotypes, obviously, right?
Yeah.
And they're all expected to think and behave in a particular stereotypical way.
Yes.
You've got the jock and the nerd and
the goth
princess,
girl,
right? The goth, like you've got them all there, and they're all expected to act the same way. And the moral, I guess, of the Breakfast Club is that they don't. Like, they don't have to. They can break those expectations, right?
Yeah.
Which
that's
is
so
interesting. And so, but you can see in that movie that even those characters, they feel pressure to stay in their expectation.
They sure do. Self pressure as well as social pressure.
Yep. Yeah.
That's really interesting. We're talking a lot about, our own, what we expect for expectations, like positive, negative, like they happen, they don't happen, our outcomes that we want are achieved or not achieved. But then, and we have a certain relationship inside of ourselves with those things. But then what about outcomes that happen to or around us that we didn't even know were a thing?
Yeah. Well, so let's chat about this very project, the self-awareness journey, because you and I, the last podcast we talked about our startup Coreology that we had a few years ago, right?
Right. Yep.
And I bet if we go listen to that, all we're going to hear is a whole ton of expectation around what that thing was gonna be.
Yeah.
It wasn't, right?
Yes, exactly.
So when you and I came together again to work on the self-awareness journey, we sat down and we were so intentional about the expectation, right?
Yes.
And
we were.
Specifically, not like, hey, what's our big grand expectation of this project? It was all around staying extremely grounded to say, hey, we have no expectation.
Right.
We're going to make some podcasts. We're going to see what happens.
Right.
We're going to make some videos. We're going to see what happens. We're not putting expectations. And then as soon as you and I got into our businessy person planning mode, where we started putting the expectations on the whiteboard, all the energy shut down.
Yes, immediately.
And that's why
That's
earlier
so
I was
true.
saying that you don't have to have big grand plans in order to create great work or
Yeah.
produce,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And, in expectations, like social pressure expectations, as soon as our circles of influence heard that we were working on something together, boom, everybody started asking questions. What are you going to do? What's happening? Like, because they know what kind of stuff we make. And I think there was a huge expectation around that. And we hired a publicist. And the publicist is like, well, what's your goal? And we're like, well, we don't really have,
No
we
goal.
just want to gain a tribe of like-minded people. That's really what we want. And she's like, yeah, but what are you going to do then? We're like, we don't know.
I don't know.
And that was not,
Yeah,
and that wasn't a popular answer. It's never a popular answer.
no. Yeah, when I told some of my business colleagues about this project, the first thing, oh, you guys are starting a business? No, we're not starting a business. It's not a business. We don't know.
And we keep saying that it's not a business. This is an art project. We're having fun.
Yeah.
And
Go
we
listen
really
to the
are.
podcast. You'll understand.
Exactly.
Well, so to me, as an artist, when I know I want to create something, the act of creation, right?
Yeah.
Those expectations are really hard on art.
Yes.
They're really hard on the art of creation because you get so in your head about what you think something should be
Yeah.
that it pretty much cripples you, right?
Yep. Yes. And if one little bead is off, then it seems like it should be scrapped or it's a failure.
Yeah. I did a lot of volunteering at the elementary school as my kids were going through in art, right? And the kids would do these projects and then they'd mess it up a little bit and they'd be so devastated. It's like, oh, I screwed it up, and they'd like crinkle up the entire piece of paper. And it was always so heartbreaking. And I'd always tell the kids, there's no wrong way to do art. Sometimes those mistakes are the best thing that could have happened to your piece of art.
Yeah, it's really true.
You know?
I really like this idea of staying in the energy of creating it instead of pushing your energy towards its conclusion. Because it keeps the energy more open, right? It's like it allows movement. It allows for all sorts of unintended consequences and outcomes as well. Like we just had this week, the exact same thing as you're talking about the self-awareness journey. You and I have been building this wonderful thing for us to learn from and hoping that other people can learn too, and really focusing on individual development. Like this is for us, like you and I, this is for us, it's for other people. And we've been focusing on it that way when suddenly we got approached by one of our corporate clients and they said, we love this work. We want you guys to curate a whole corporate plan around the self-awareness journey for us.
Yep. Right out of the blue. Like
right
we were
out
sitting
of the
down to do
blue.
the podcast, then all of a sudden, you're like, hey, wait, this thing just happened. Like, what are you even talking about?
I know. So like there's an outcome we had absolutely no plan about. We had no intention. And yet what a beautiful outcome and what a beautiful idea. So we were just like rock sideways about that outcome and because it came in and we hadn't considered that.
Yep. So 2 things about that particular incident for me. Incident, I call it an incident. It's like an incident. It's like an awesome thing that happened. Speaking of that horrible accident where a huge opportunity fell into our lap, there's 2 emotions that I felt. Like first, I was, obviously like really excited and proud of the work we were doing. Like, wow, someone noticed. It resonates with them. They want to do it. And then my second wave was like, oh, now we actually have to make something for somebody for money.
Yeah, expectation.
And right there, that last word is the expectation. It's like, wait, no, our project doesn't have expectations around it.
Yeah.
That's part of its magic.
We had a day and a half of being sideways.
Yeah, we couldn't do any, like we were just completely
Yep.
stopped, like in our tracks.
Yeah.
Like it was amazing to like observe.
I would say we weren't stopped in our tracks. What we actually did is we left the trail that we've been on and we tried to find the corporate development trail like we had done in the past. And we tried to do a whole planning session, and we just got over our skis in expectation and a little bit of stress. Mm-hmm. Because we immediately went into, wait, all of our energy around this, oh my gosh, we must be wrong because look at someone else loved it. we should change everything. And then we kind of got over that. Like it took about a day and a half, but we got over it. Mm-hmm. And then we were like, wait a minute. And you had framed it in a really different way. And then we were like kind of back on. We were back on. And what's so wonderful about this too is not only did this client have interest in it, but this client had interest in it fast. Mm-hmm. Like, so there's not a lot of time for us to wander around and create more expectations and to create, strong concerns for outcomes not being perfect. I mean, there just isn't time for that. And that's actually helping us stay open in the mind of the creation.
Yep. Yeah. So I like the idea that even if something unexpected in a positive way happens, it still knocks you off balance for a little while.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, if we're honest, I think that when an unexpected outcome comes to us, and in this case, it was a beautiful, really awesome one. The energy that kind of rocked us was we did not have the control. We did not push that expectation. We didn't push that outcome at all. That outcome was a natural byproduct of some of the other things that we had done, but we weren't thinking about that. So we felt out of control. Mm-hmm. We felt out of control.
So if other people's expectations of us make us feel like we're not in control, like think about that. Mm-hmm. How often does that happen to you just on a personal level?
Yeah.
Every day. We're talking about a big project here, but if you just bring that down to like,
oh, I know.
Other people expect me to act in a certain way. I don't, or I don't want to, or I don't like the expectation of that.
Yeah. That's real. We all have that. We all have that. And I think as we've been talking in previous podcasts, we talk a lot about validation, getting validation, external validation. Well, it's right here, isn't it? It's like, I expect you to do this for me. And if you do this for me, then I will validate you and say, good job. Thank you for being a part of this house. Thank you for being a part of this work team. And there it is. It is a really interesting thing to think about, other people's expectations on the front end of that. And what does that do to you? What does that do to me?
And sometimes if someone expects something of me and then I don't do it, then I feel guilty.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And there's the judgment part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or shame. I always do that. Why can I never?
Yeah. Why can't I ever put the dishes in the dishwasher?
Why can't I ever
Not that that's a conversation.
Why can't I ever shut the cupboard door all the way? Yeah. Well, this is an interesting topic to talk about, what we believe our expectations for ourselves and for things that we're a part of, and how we try to muscle and control outcomes of things. And sometimes they're really not the right outcomes, and we know they aren't, but we still push them because we feel like we're supposed to have some sort of expectation in the queue, or we're not producing. And then we have outcomes that happen to us that are so unexpected. And that rocks us too, because we haven't been in our minds trying to control all of that. It's very interesting to think about that in the day-to-day, just in living, day-to-day, just straight up regular living.
Yep. And so maybe we just suggest that everyone try to relax some of those expectations, right?
Yeah.
Not saying like don't do anything, don't sit on the couch all day, but like just like release some of your expectations and just see where life takes you.
Yeah. And I even think like, take out a sheet of paper and like take your own inventory. Like, what expectations are you living with that you're creating? And are they right for you? Like, do they feel right even? Like, do they exist, or are they just existing in your picture of your brain, but not how you in your feelings, you know that you're never, like, I'm going to lose 20 pounds by Christmas, stuff like that. It's like those things sit in the background and they constantly play that tape over and over again. And we know in our hearts that it's not likely that's going to happen, or it's not really actually meant for us. But we just continually play those loops over and over again, creating even stronger and stronger expectations. So then when the outcome isn't that, we feel really bad. So it'd be interesting just to take your own, think about what kinds of thing that you normally expect in your life and just check in with yourself. Are they really right? And I like what you said. It's like, it's perfectly fine to take your foot off the gas a little bit. It's perfectly fine to do that and not push yourself so hard. We hope that you've enjoyed today's episode. Our mission is to help people become happier and more effective by gaining insight into their own thoughts and feelings. We'd love your support. First, share this podcast with anyone you think might enjoy it. Second, leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast site. This helps others discover the podcast so we can reach more people. And third, sign up for our newsletter at theselfawarenessjourney.com. This will help us communicate better with you and build our community. Thank you so much for joining us in the Self-Awareness Journey. We'll see you next week.